Good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you again. This morning I was launching into my time of looking at God's Word, and one of the things that really struck me was just the importance and centrality of prayer as we come and we read. And what I want to do this morning is just share with you a little bit about the process that I use, the thoughts that go through my mind in prayer every time I sit down and look at God's Word. And please don't get me wrong, there is no right or wrong way to do it. I've just found that these are some of the helpful tools that have been helpful to me along the way. It's been adopted from a little segment in a book by Brennan Manning called A Glimpse of Jesus, and I highly recommend that book, but it really helped me to reframe the way I come both to prayer and specifically to the reading of God's Word. I think the first step is to simply become aware that when we read God's Word, this isn't just some book. These aren't just some random words, but that the same God that flung the stars into the furthest corner of the universe is present to us every time that we read. And one of the things that we can do is just simply take the step of becoming aware that God is here. I think one of the great dangers that we face in any spiritual discipline is that we simply go through the motions of doing things on the outside without recognizing the significance and the importance of the attitudes of the heart. And I think one of the biggest and most helpful tools for me is to simply be aware that God is there. Maybe even just take 10, 15 seconds where you are and reflect on the fact that the God of the universe, the God of all wisdom, the God of all power, He's here, right now, as we seek Him. Now, a second step, and I think it's equally important, is to not only believe that God is there, but to believe that He actually wants to speak. I think one of the great fears that I have when I read God's Word is that I'm going to read it and I'm not going to get anything out of it. And to be sure, there may be days that the point may not be immediately clear, but there's a trust that every time we read, because of the love of God, He is going to use it for our transformation. Maybe one of the greatest hindrances that keeps us from hearing God's voice is simply the fact that we're afraid that He doesn't want to speak to us. And friends, the example of Jesus and the beautiful gift of His Word say everything to the counter. And what if we really came to this time of prayer believing that Jesus actually has something to say, that Jesus really wants to speak to you, that Jesus really wants to affirm and transform you to the glory of His name? How would that change the way we read? It changes everything. Even the passages that we see as maybe we don't get the meaning, or they just seem commonplace, we realize that they are a supernatural tool in the hands of God. I mean, just think about it for a second. How would things change if you really believed Jesus wanted to speak to you? And then the last, and that is simply to come with an attitude of being willing to obey. The great temptation that we face when we look at God's Word is to simply read it, to study it, to know everything about it, and to never actually do what it calls us to. One of the things that I like to do when I come into my time of prayer is simply to say, Jesus, cleanse me of every distraction, cleanse me of every divided place in my heart, cleanse me of every self-illusion that would keep me from hearing from you. Because let's face it, we have a lot of competing voices in our heads and in our hearts. And when we allow the grace of God to speak into those spaces, it's nothing short of transformational. I mean, let's face it. If we come to our time in God's Word and we're not really willing to do what it says, should we be surprised if He doesn't speak? But rather, what we do is we say, Jesus, come, transform, shape, mold. Write your words on the deepest places of my heart, that I might honor and glorify you in every way. And so, friends, from there, I launch into this time, and no, it's not perfect. Yes, there are days that I still walk away and things don't make sense to me. But I'm convinced that these pieces put my heart in a right place to hear and in a place of humble trust to allow God to do his work in and through me. And so may the grace of God fill and surround you today. May he overwhelm you with a deep, abiding sense of his word. And may you experience and see his transformation to the glory of his name. Love you guys, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Blessings. Bye-bye.